Come along on this late June drive with Club Miata Northwest as we drive the back roads along the Columbia Gorge. The route ends in the middle of the gorge on the eastern side of the Cascades in the little town of Lisle, Washington. To get there we start from Woodland along I-5 north of Vancouver and head east through green rolling hills and along the Swift Reservoir below Mount St. Helens. At the eastern end we turn south and climb up and over the mountains to reach the Columbia River. The western start of the drive crossed a patchwork of grassy fields interspersed with stands of evergreens. Yet despite that, broad-leafed maple trees, conifers, and dense underbrush hugged the sides of the road limiting views across the landscape. The weather was fantastic from the 8 a.m. start all the way through the whole weekend. Nothing but sunny skies and dry pavement the whole way. There is a whole network of these wonderful winding backroads in the area and one can build a number of excellent routes by stitching together a series of roads. Then, too, there are a few worthy stretches of asphalt worming their way up into the hills on a dead-end journey. This was one such where we got to the end of the road and found a good turnaround to retrace the route back down the hill. It was fun passing our own group and getting to wave at everyone still approaching the U-turn. As we approached State Route 503 we crossed a time-worn old one-lane suspension bridge. We needed to take our turns as a sign stated only one car is allowed on the span at a time. Though, really, with vehicles as light as the Miata we probably could have crossed a few at a time. Shortly after the bridge crossing we came to our first rest stop of the morning in the town of Cougar. Well, calling Cougar a town is perhaps a little much. But by this time we weren't complaining and it was good to stretch our legs.
Not experience the waves of the low life.
Yeah, no. What do you mean low life?
Like sitting low like this car is.
Yeah.
Once again we were underway, heading east on a tree-covered road cut into the hillside above the Swift Reservoir. The road's been getting rougher in recent years but it appears some repairs were made in the year since I last drove it. Pavement was smooth enough. The few cars we came upon politely found turnouts and let us pass so we could continue on our merry way, free of traffic. As a bit of a treat and surprise we zipped up the mountain to the McClellan Overlook. Earlier in the week I had been contacted by Fred with the Mount Hood Miata Club. It turned out they were running the first half of our drive but in reverse. Through some exchanged emails we figure out we'd get to the overlook at about the same time. And wouldn't it be great if the two clubs could meet up? Sure enough, within about 15 minutes the Mount Hood Miata Club came zooming by. and missed the turn into the overlook. We all got a chuckle as we saw them go by, only because we nearly did the same ourselves. I almost missed the turn in leading our own group. It took them a few extra minutes to get to the bottom of the mountain and get turned around, but when they arrived it was with a whole mess of Miatas. Fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, that's a fantastic one.
We are lacking only a mountain to make it a full set.
I know. I was hoping we'd get a mountain view with everybody here.
I'm sorry?
I counted 28. I don't know how many altogether here.
We've done the whole suspension, all the bushings, full exhaust. It's like basically there's hardly anything left to replace on it.
After we said our goodbyes, the Mount Hood Miata Club headed out the way we had come while we continued south. Not long after leaving the McClellan overlook, the route crested the mountains and began a winding plunge downward, toward the Columbia Gorge. It was one banked turn after the next on smooth pavement. That is, until we encountered a scenic driver. But yay! They were attentive and kindly pulled over to let us pass. We were having good luck with traffic so far today. After the last few twisties the road dropped into a valley and we headed for Stevenson for lunch along the Columbia River. Afterwards driving east along State Route 14, further into the gorge. Highway 14 is gorgeous but less than twisty. We were after the curvy roads darting up and away from the river, which proved fun with nice views looping back to the water. However, going from loop to loop we'd get split up with the flow of traffic and needed to regroup at the next loop.
Man, they must be way back there. We're almost there.
This was one of my favorite sections of road this day. It was newly paved only in the last few years. But it was an intense collection of hairpin turns and twisty connectors that dropped 2,000 feet in elevation from the top of the bluff all the way down to the water's edge. The mix of trees transitioned from dark stands of fir to airy groves of Oregon white oak as we descended the bluff. The closer we got to the water, the more the oak groves opened up to areas of dry grasses. The views from the road were spectacular, particularly of Mount Hood and the views down the river under crystal blue skies. But most folks were focused on the drive, and it became a real exercise in speed management to not overheat the brakes on the constant downhill. 4.5 miles later we got to the bottom. The brakes had been thoroughly worked over and we could smell them for a while afterwards. But we all made it down safely and no one reported any brake fade. Old roads, long since bypassed by Highway 14, danced among the dry grassy hills and rocky outcroppings overlooking the Columbia River. We pressed on eastward, enjoying the scenery and sun. Eventually we'd reach the small hamlet of Lisle. After another stretch break at the Lisle trailhead we turned northward following the Klickitat River, a tributary of the mighty Columbia. As it meandered through the valley it cut into a basalt plateau. At the north end of the canyon the road narrows to an unmarked single-lane road as it hugs the canyon wall, climbing up and onto the plateau itself. Mount Adams greeted us off in the distance as we approached the edge of the Glenwood Canyon. From the top of the plateau we would drop into the canyon to cross the Klickitat River again. On the way down the road twists and turns following the contours of the canyon side on its gentle descent. Each time we'd come around a bend in the road we were pointing in a different direction for unique views the whole way down to the bottom. After the intense drive down and out of the canyon the road straightened out as it led to the Camas Prairie lands and the small town of Glenwood. This was the apex of a loop leading out from Lisle and back and made an excellent place to stop and get some refreshments at the Glenwood General Store. They even had some wonderful chairs under the shade of some pine trees nearby.
It's just like, it's absolutely cooking. Yeah. I'm roasting it there.
We would end up hugging the north edge of Camas Prairie as we drove over to the Trout Lake area where we hugged the northern edge of that valley as well. The two prairies are separated by some hilly terrain covered in fir trees. As we approach the Trout Lake area, the road drops down out of the hills and exits the fir trees, providing us a nice view across the open grassy fields. Always present off in the distance is Mount Adams, which pops into view from time to time. About the midpoint of the loop, we cut back up through a woodsy ravine and then across a small clearing of farms and meadows, working our way back toward Camas Prairie to the northeast. We had a great view of the valley looking back over our shoulder as the road ascended through the trees. When we left Camas Prairie again for the last time, we headed south, making our way back to Lisle. The route south started off with broad sweepers and then gently rolling terrain through timber forests. But as we came down off the plateau, the road followed one of the smaller canyons back to the Columbia River. My word, was this an awesomely twisty bit of road. Off in the distance we'd catch glimpses of Mount Hood and the Columbia Gorge. The sights would tease us as we got closer and closer to the river and were back amongst the Oregon white oaks and dry grassy hillsides. Eight and a half miles of this fantastic road? What a capper to an awesome day of driving. This took us back into the town of Lisle and to the Klickitat trailhead rest stop we were at before. This ended up being a 3-hour loop from the Columbia, around Camas Prairie and back to the mighty river. The return also marked the end of the drive. Once we got back to the parking lot, some folks started to split for home. Lisle is in the middle of seemingly nowhere, on the eastern end of the Columbia Gorge, and it's a longish drive home for some. There were a few of us who decided to book lodging for the night in the nearby Dalles, Oregon, which was only about 15 minutes away across the river. While the official drive wrapped up in Lisle in the early evening on Saturday, there was still some fun to be had. The idea being to try out some of the twisty roads on the south side of the Columbia in Oregon before heading home on Sunday. After dinner, Zeke and I motored up to a lookout perched on the cliffs above the Columbia to do a little relaxed route scouting at sunset. Along the way it was heartbreaking to see the aftermath of the Rowena fire that tore through the area only a couple weeks before. Homes had been lost and the charred husks of cars and trucks were eerie reminders of the wildfires in the west. At the top of the overlook we did have some wonderful sunset views over the gorge and across to the town of Lisle. The next morning we retraced the evening scouting route in reverse, heading overland heading west for a bit before returning to the overlook in the morning light. From here we made our way home, crossing back into Washington and heading north through Yakima. From there the last of us would split up after lunch and go our separate ways. Thanks to all who came out on the drive this weekend. I had a blast sharing the route I've been wanting to try for a while now. And a big thanks to Fred and the Mount Hood Miata Club. It was awesome to be able to meet up at the McClellan Overlook with your crew. Here's to looking forward to doing this drive again.